Okay, we're calling the meeting on the Committee of Environment, Climate, and Legacy to order. Let the record show that today is Tuesday, January 21st, 3:05. And welcome back, everybody, all the members, and also our agency, people in the audience, our constituents. Welcome back. Happy New Year to all of you. It's a refreshing new year. Also, for the next couple of weeks or even until the end of this session, we'll be gearing for shared power. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We also have 4 items today. And the 4 items are about reports from our agency, Department of Natural Resource, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and Bowser. I also want to first welcome Senator Joukowsky and also Senator Ann Johnson. She's in the other room right now, and Capital Investment, and Senator Westrom. Welcome to the Environment Committee. I'm gonna go do a round of introduction for everybody to talk a little bit about themselves, but not too much. Stay within a confine of no more than 1 minute or so, if that will certainly help. Let me see. I'd like first of all, let members here introduce themselves, and then we go and have Mr. Stanley talk about our chair, gavel, with Senator Eichhorn. Also, welcome back as well. So I'm the chair of this committee. My name is Fong He. I represent Eastside St. Paul. This is my 12th year in the Senate, and this is the first time I chair this committee. First term I chair this committee, and this year will be share a little bit with Senator Eichhorn. And one thing that I want to stress out is that for members to talk about something that you did over the interim that regard to the environment. So I think it's a good way for me to start off too. I just been called to go to oversee, being that my background and culture are of diaspora, and there is the Hmong community in Thailand, about 125,000 citizens of Thailand that are Hmong descent, and I've been invited to Pitchbun province, is the equivalent of Twin City, where the largest Hmong community live, and to commence their new year with the governor of Pitchbun. And the environment connection is that I plant a tree there together with the governor there for the state of Minnesota to signify our unity, our cultural unity, and also our environmental stewardship. So I just thought I'd bring that into forefront. And so I'd like to go this way, this direction, because I see more of the new member on this side. And so that's it for my introduction. Next is our next member. I'd like you to introduce yourself and your role in this committee, and also tell us one thing that you did over the interim that connect to the environment.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm State Senator Jen McEwen. I'm the vice chair, one of the vice chairs right now of the Environment, Climate, and Legacy Committee. I represent Duluth, the beautiful community of Duluth in the Minnesota State Senate. And this is my beginning of my 5th year in the Senate. My second, I was elected first in the 2-year term, and then now in the middle of my 4-year term. One of the things I guess I would say in environmental wise that I did during the interim, living in Duluth, we very much live amongst the environment. I have a beautiful garden. I grew amazing heirloom tomatoes this last year, which I was very proud of. I have tons of pictures on my phone if anyone wants to see my tomatoes. It was wonderful. A bunch of them are canned and in my freezer. So I spent a lot of time out in my garden and in Duluth. And as people know, Duluth is on the most magnificent lake in the world, Lake Superior. So I took in the lake a lot. I love swimming in the lake, just going down to see the waves on the lake, looking out across the city and seeing the lake. And then I also had the opportunity this fall to visit Hawaii, where my son has decided to attend school. And so really got to take in the ocean there and the beauty in Hawaii that is just so different than what we have in northern Minnesota. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair McEwen. Next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Steve Drazkowski, Senate District 20. I live in Wabasha County. This is my first term in the Minnesota Senate. Prior to that, I actually began in the Minnesota House in 2007, and so then was elected to the Senate here in 2022 in the election there. The things that I've done over the interim, I mean, I love hunting and fishing. I never do enough, but I've been fishing both in Minnesota and Ontario, hunted in Wisconsin, and done plenty of brush clearing and pruning of trees, lots of chainsaw work on my property. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Senator Drazkowski. Introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry I'm late. Senator Grant Hochschild, State Senator for District 3. I have the privilege of representing the largest, most rural, and most importantly, most beautiful district in the state of Minnesota. I get to represent the North Shore. I get to represent 65% of the Canadian border, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, Superior National Forest, half the Iron Range, and the communities of Hermantown, Proctor, and Rice Lake. So really privileged to be here. And this is one of my favorite committees, Mr. Chair. So excited for this year ahead.
Thank you. Glad to have you back. Next is...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Tory Westrom, Senate District 12, in western and central Minnesota, Stearns, Douglas, Pope, Stevens, Big Stone, and Swift counties, all communities west of St. Cloud, Alexandria being the biggest, Sauk Center, Glenwood, Ortonville, Morris, Benson area, just to give you a geographic reference. First time serving on the Environment Committee in the Senate, so great to be here. Served with you, Mr. Chair, on the LCCMR, and you've been on our Ag Committee before when I was chair, so good to see be on your committee again. Environment, like to always get out and enjoy the lakes in our area. Alexandria and western Minnesota is a big lakes area. I had a great time with some friends of ours that had their boat, and we went and toured the chain of lakes and did the eating on the chain of lakes this past summer, which was a fun experiment, or a fun entertainment, and just a way to really enjoy the beautiful outdoors and creation we have in our state.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee as well, Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Steve Green. I'm in third year of my first term in the Senate, served in the House for 10 years. My district goes from about 10 miles north of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, a little town called Callaway, and it takes in a big area up through Bemidji and all the way up to the northwest angle, which I also represent. It's a great area. I represent the city of Bemidji, is my biggest city, and I have 3 Indian reservations. Big part of my summer, actually, was spent putting out fires caused by this committee. So, because they raked us over the coals pretty good, and they still do. But anyway, the agencies anyway. But anyway, glad to be back.
Yeah, and I hope it's not the real fire like California.
Pardon me?
It's not the real fire like California, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Senator Green. Now we're gonna go to this side of the aisle, starting from a lady from Roseville, Falcon Heights. Is that your district?
No.
No? Correct us.
Keep going. Senator Mary Kunish. I represent District 37, which are the communities of St. Anthony Village and New Brighton, Columbia Heights, Spring Lake Park, and Fridley. And I am in my 5th year, just like Senator McEwen here in the Minnesota Senate, Chair of Education Finance. I spent a lot of time outside with my granddaughters, introducing them to why insects and bugs are good for us, even though bees were stinging right and left all summer long. Thank heavens they're not allergic to it. I also was able to visit a few farms this summer. I'm on the Ag Committee, and so we went and visited a few farms to talk about soil management and water management, crop protection and rotation, fertilizer management. Spoke with some of the organic farmers who are the providers at farmers market. I started the farmers market in my community about 8 years ago, and it's still doing really well. So I spent a lot of time at that farmers market as well. I also am on the Great Lakes Legislative Committee, so we had a great conference to talk about the beauty and the protections of our beautiful Great Lakes.
Thank you, Senator Cornish.
Thank you. Senator Nathan Wiesenberg, I represent Senate District 10 in central Minnesota, and I guess I'm always outside hunting and fishing and camping and enjoying the outdoors. That's my favorite place to be. So hopefully we can make some good happen here this year in session and in committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Senator Herr and Co-Chair. Yes, State Senator Justin Eichhorn, Grand Rapids and the Brainerd Lakes area, although people in my district don't necessarily identify with their towns as much as they do their lakes. So Gull Lake, Cross Lake, Pekagama Lake, I could go on for a while. We got quite a few lakes in my district. As far as what I did over the interim, I spent a lot of time enjoying Minnesota's favorite frozen waters, and that would be hockey rinks. I chased my kids around a lot of the summer. Between figure skating, hockey, and a bunch of soccer fields, that took up a lot of summer, but certainly I do enjoy that part of our culture and our outdoors as well, at least for the soccer stuff. So had a lot of fun doing that, and I'm looking forward to chairing this committee together. I think there's a lot of work we can certainly get done, and we've had a cordial relationship the last couple of years, and I certainly expect that we'll have that going forward. So looking forward to working together and continuing some of our work on this committee. So I don't know if it'd be beneficial or not, but some new staff as well at the table might be okay to have a few of them, if you're up to it, have them introduce themselves as well.
Let's do that after the senators. So we have one more senator, a gentleman from Chaplin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I appreciate the moment that you give me, the next 45 minutes. I want to explain to you the full breadth of what I did this. You guys, my wife is right. I'm not funny. I won't try to be funny. But John Hoffman and Champlin represent Senate District 34, which is a little island in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Champlin, Coon Rapids, Dayton, Rogers, and 40 people in Otsego. And I was saying it is the largest suburban rural / Senate district. It's 23 miles long. And then Tory Western reminded me how many counties and how many parades he has to be in the summer. So I quickly stopped saying that. And but it's always, this is so fun to be part of this Environment, Climate, and Legacy Committee because of the work that you do. It embraces and touches so many people and so many lives that we do in Minnesota. And so with that, nice to see you again, Chair and Chair, and let's have some fun.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing the fun to the committee. I'm a little poised in personality, a little calm in personality too. So always good to have extra people that can bring the fun. So let's go to the staff as Vice Chair Eichhorn, Co-Chair Eichhorn.
Thank you, Chair. Here, Victor Florell. I'm Senator Eichhorn's legislative assistant, and I'll just be helping Kara and Michael with the duties while we have this sharing agreement. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dan Mueller. I'm the fiscal analyst for the committee.
Mr. Chair, Ben Stanley. I am the nonpartisan counsel for the committee.
Cara Josephson, the committee administrator for the committee.
Michael Vu, legislative assistant, Senator Fong Har.
Thank you. We also have two members behind the desk here, our caucus researcher, Mr. Greg Exley, and for GOP, and Cassie Tomadoff for DFL. We're still setting up Zoom right now for one of our member. I believe is Senator Lane will connect with us as soon as the Zoom is set up. And just to say ahead of time, especially at the beginning of the session here, that if any member will be on Zoom, please let our CA, Community Administrator, our Victor, know, our staff know ahead of time so we can prep that. Otherwise, we will not be instantly ready for Zoom. So thank you. Since I have the gavel, and I did mention earlier about my opportunity to go plant a tree in Thailand for Minnesota, just so that since some of you might be curious, I can state the coordinate that is 16.811 and comma 100.96. So that's where our Minnesota tree is in Thailand with our name Minnesota on it. So they will make sure that it will water well and keep it alive for as long as it live, and make sure if it's died, it will be replaced. Senator Hoffman also and I have a chance to plant 2 trees too at Colo Avery, wildlife management area. 2, yeah. 2,000 trees, but there's one that you plant and the other you plant for me. I weren't there, but thank you for representing us. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we should go back there and see how that's going, because the intent was to raise certain trees so that the squirrel population, and apparently, you know, some people who like to hunt squirrel, so you better take Wiesenberg with you, because there's probably, I'm sure he has that in his background as well. So no, it was good. It was fun plan.
Yeah. So thank you for all the introduction. Now we're gonna go to the real business here. And on our agenda, we'll have Mr. Stanley talk a little bit about our joint agreement, or agreement between the co-chair, and how we're gonna proceed with our shared power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, good afternoon. As Chair Herr mentioned, the co-chairs, Senator Eichhorn and Senator Herr, met and have agreed that this committee will operate as follows. Senator Herr is chairing today. Senator Eichhorn will chair the next 2 meetings, and then Senator Herr will chair the following 2 meetings after that. Thereafter, the chair will rotate every time a given chair has chaired 2 meetings. The committee will only meet at its regularly scheduled time unless additional meetings are approved by both chairs. Committee agendas will be set by mutual agreement of the co-chairs. Points of order and related questions will be decided by whichever chair is chairing that day's meeting after consultation with the other co-chair. In accordance with the requirements of Senate Resolution 1, passing a bill out of this committee will require a vote of a majority of all members of the committee. For this committee, that's 7. All other motions will be decided by a majority of those present and voting, as is the usual practice. This agreement will remain in force until Senate Resolution 1 is terminated.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Any questions from members? All right, so
Mr. Chair.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Stanley, could you just email that out in a Word document to me or other members if they want? It'd be nice to have just that as a nice template.
Mr. Chair, Senator Westrom, if the co-chairs instruct us to do that, we can do that, certainly.
Okay. All right, the co-chair agree. So all members will receive the agreement in written form to your email. Okay, next on our agenda is an overview on our finance, our budget, and how we're gonna on our budget, and that will lead on to our, not today, but the intent of this whole session is to make sure that we have a balanced budget. So, Mr. Mueller, can you go over that, or Mr. Stanley, do you have something else to say?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm going to butt in front of Mr. Mueller here and just briefly talk about the jurisdiction of the committee before Mr. Mueller goes over the budget. This committee has jurisdiction over all bills related to the environment and the state's natural resources, as well as over the legacy funds that Mr. Mueller will talk about. The main state agencies that are handled in this committee include the Environmental Quality Board, the Department of Natural Resources, the Pollution Control Agency, and the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Additionally, in your packet, there is a page that has a number of other smaller entities that are covered by the jurisdiction of this committee. I'll just mention a few. They include the Clean Water Council, Conservation Corps Minnesota, the Drainage Work Group, Forest Resources Council, the Great Lakes Commission, the Land Exchange Board, the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, LCCMR, that's the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, the Minnesota Zoo, the Mississippi Headwaters Board, and the Legislative Coordinating Commission Subcommittee on Water Policy. The committee also has jurisdiction over a number of confirmations related to these agencies. And then I should also mention that tax forfeited lands, although it has the word tax in it, this committee has primary jurisdiction over issues related to those lands, as well as to most other state-owned lands. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Mueller.
Mr. Mueller.
Mr. Chairman and members, there should be in your packet, excuse me, a 3-page, it's a summary of the budget in this, under this jurisdiction of this committee. The handout is structured just with agency totals for each fund, and it shows the fiscal year 22-23, which is the previous biennium budget, the fiscal year 24-25, which is the current year budget, and then fiscal year 26-27, which is the base budget of the upcoming biennium. This does not include any of the governor's recommendations. As Mr. Stanley mentioned, the agencies, I'll just briefly go through each agency and highlight some of the main funds. The first agency is the Pollution Control Agency. In a lot of these columns, you'll see in fiscal year 24-25, there's a big increase of general fund money. There was a lot of one-time general fund money that was appropriated in the current biennium that you'll see goes back down to the base budget in the fiscal year 26-27 forecast. For example, in the Pollution Control Agency on line 3 under general fund, you'll see $289 million being appropriated in 24-25, and then the base budget for general fund goes back down to $17.5 million in 26-27. The other line I'll mention on under Pollution Control Agency is the Environmental Fund. This is largely the fund that funds the agency. It consisted of money from the solid waste tax and a motor vehicle transfer fee, and also all the different fees that go to the agency for permitting. So you see the total base budget in fiscal year 26-27 for Pollution Control Agency, including all funds, is $811.5 million. The Department of Natural Resources starts on line 14. Again, the general fund portion of that you'll see is higher in 24-25 than it is the base budget in 26-27. The two other main funds that the Department of Natural Resources uses is the Natural Resources Fund. These are largely fees that are collected from the various recreational vehicles like ATVs, snowmobiles, and boats. Also, the parks fees go into the Natural Resources Fund. The next largest funding source you'll see is the Game and Fish Fund. Those are largely supported by the hunting and fishing license fees. Agency total budget, looking at the base budget in fiscal year 26-27 is about $1.2 million, or billion dollars, when you include all the funds. Next, we have Met Council Metro Parks. The small portion of the Met Council is funded through this committee dealing with Metro Parks. Their base funding in general fund is about $5 million. You'll see in the current biennium, they received a big increase of general fund money. It was about $29.5 million. They also get some money from the Natural Resources Fund, which is from the Lottery in Lieu account. So their base funding is $22.9 million. The Conservation Corps is the next agency that's funded in this agency. They receive a mix of general fund and natural resources fund. Their base funding is $2.1 million. Next agency is Board of Water and Soil Resources, or as we will always call it here, Bowser. You'll see their funding levels for the base fund, for the current base biennium is $62.7 million. And you'll also see in the current biennium in 24-25 under general fund, they also received a large portion of one-time money. It was $123.6 million in 24-25, and their base budget in general fund is 31.5. Next page, we have the Minnesota Zoo. I'll note on line 48 is their general fund appropriations, and then line 49 under special revenue fund, that is actually their gate receipts that is tracked through that fund. So you see the general fund for their base budget is about $27.2 million, and then the gate receipts end up being about close to $48 million. The last agency that is funded in this budget committee is the Science Museum, and they receive a general fund appropriation. Again, in 24-25, they had a big increase in one-time money. It was $10.2 million, and then their base budget in 26-27 is back down to 2.5. The last item on line 62 is a ongoing transfer from the general fund to the Metropolitan Landfill Contingency Action Trust account. It's a $200,000 ongoing transfer, but you'll see there in 24-25, some of the one-time general fund money went. About $27.6 million was transferred into that account to replenish it. You'll see the totals by fund starting on line 64. I'll just note the general fund here in the base budget for fiscal year 26-27 is $423.4 million, and that is less than 1% of the total general fund of the whole general fund budget across all state agencies. It's actually about 0.6%. And so the total budget in this area, looking at their base budget, is about $2.2 billion. On the last page, you'll see the other two funds or other two budget areas that this agency or this committee has under its jurisdiction. These are the legacy funds, and you'll see that starting on page 3 on line 87. There are 4 legacy funds: the Outdoor Heritage Fund, the Clean Water Fund, the Parks and Trails Fund, and the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. They receive their money based on 0.3% of the sales of a sales tax that's in addition to the current sales tax. And each year of the biennium, we only appropriate for 2 years. It's kind of a zero-based budget item. So for the fiscal year 26-27, the amount, we leave 5% available on the bottom line. The amount available to appropriate for the Outdoor Heritage Fund is going to be about $327 million. From the Clean Water Fund, about $310.7 million. From the Parks and Trails Fund, $133 million. And the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, about $185 million. The other budget area is the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. This committee also passes a separate budget bill for that. Line number 97 are based on the recommendations from the LCCMR, and there'll be 2 separate, they usually make a recommendation for each budget year of the biennium. So the number you see on line 97 is actually a 2-year amount, $206.6 million. That is 5% of the trust fund. And then new this year will be the DNR community grants. This was enacted when the voters approved the extension of the trust fund this last election. So there will be a new program that will spend 1.5% of the trust fund, and for the biennium that'll be about $56.4 million. And that'll be, the current statute has that money going through the DNR, and that'll also be appropriated by this committee. That's all I have, and happy to answer any questions, but this was just intended to be a brief overview of the budget, and we will be spending more time looking at specific items, and I'm sure when the agencies come up later on, they'll go through more details of their budget also.
Okay, members, any question to Mr. Mueller? Senator Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification then, excuse me, Mr. Stanley, you've got it broken down into two. So when we approve or not, the Environmental Trust Fund, is it approved as one bill, or will there be two separate portions of it for lines 97 and 98?
Mr. Stanley?
Mr. Chair, Senator Green, we don't know yet is the short answer. It hasn't been done. Traditionally, as you know, the LCCMR bill comes over from the commission and is handled, sometimes ultimately it passes as a standalone bill. Sometimes it's part of an omnibus bill. There's a couple different ways you could do the community grants portion of that. But the way the statute is written, the community grants is a separate process from the LCCMR process. So I don't know that you would need to handle the two together because they are totally different processes.
Okay. Let the record show that we also have quorum, and we have now another member join us online. Senator, I'll let the senator that's online right now introduce himself. Yeah, tell us who you are, where you represent, and one thing you did over the interim that relate to the environment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Senator Andrew Lang. Currently representing 4 counties in southwestern Minnesota. I've been on the Environment Committee this will be my 9th session on the Environment Committee. And in the environment, I am a fairly avid outdoorsman, so I spend a lot of time. And as of recently, I think one of my most active outdoor roles has been cutting wood for my wood burning stove. So that keeps me pretty busy. But yeah, we did some clear cutting this year on some property up north, and and I can tell you what, that by this time next year, that will probably be all grown over again. It's pretty amazing how fast the forestry can renew itself. So yeah, that's all about me. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lane. And I myself really enjoy having all of you here as 12 members now. We all represent our district, and we also have our own personality and also personal interests as a whole for the betterment of Minnesota in terms of environment and preservation as well. So, glad to have all of your service here. Next on our agenda, we're going to the raw material now. Is to call one of our state agency forward to give us their report, Minnesota Department of Natural Resource, Mr. Bartmeyer and Mr. John Water. Welcome, and introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Bob Meyer, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Natural Resources, and I have with me today John Waters, our government relations supervisor, as he's plugging in our computer here. Hope we will get all wrapped up, ready to go. The buttons are still in the same spot, so I can confirm that, and they work, so we will move forward. Mr. Chairman, members, thank you again. As I said, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss this overview with you, and we look forward to meeting with you in committee and in person or remotely, whatever you desire, on any questions, comments from this proposal, any bills you have, or governor's budget, or however we can work together to be effective this coming session. So thank you for that. Next slide. This is a slide containing our commissioner leadership, and I'm honored to be a part of this dedicated leadership team. Commissioner Sarah Strawman, along with our Deputy Commissioner Barb Naramore, Assistant Commissioners Jess Richards and Shannon Louthammer. Each of us in the legislature, along with our leadership team of division and regional directors, look forward to working with you throughout the course of the session, and we'll talk more about our leadership team as we go through the presentation. The mission of the DNR is to work with Minnesotans to conserve and manage the state's natural resources, to provide outdoor recreation opportunities, and to provide for commercial uses of our natural resources in a way that creates a sustainable quality of life. The main part, or the key part of our mission, is that we are dedicated to working with Minnesotans. Throughout the decades and all the challenges that we face, one thing that remains consistent is the value that Minnesotans place on our natural resources. It's core to the values and the identity of our state that we continue to steward our natural resources for future generations. And as we do this work, the DNR has a responsibility of keeping a careful balance between conservation, recreation, and natural resource economy. I like to use this slide because it really highlights how these three parts of our mission all work together. For example, outdoor recreation, the hopeful, or the snowmobiling that we have going on, and hopefully more of that this season, provides economic development, economic engine to many places in northern Minnesota. Our outdoor recreation trail system, the hunters that we have, the boating and recreation industry, all provide economic development. However, without proper protection and natural resource protection of those assets, our lakes, our rivers, our streams, our boat water access sites, none of this would be possible. The DNR strives to work in the middle of these three circles to really exemplify how these three pieces of our mission work together. When we get outside of those three kind of areas there, favoring one issue or the other is where sometimes we get in questions or conversations with our stakeholders and Minnesotans in general. Next slide. DNR has 4 administrative regions throughout the state. In Northwest Region 1, Ben Berge is our recent new regional director there. Region 2, which is based in Grand Rapids, Shelley Patton is our regional director. Region 3, based here in St. Paul, Grant Wilson, that runs down through the Mississippi to the southern border of our state. And Region 4, I would like to congratulate Regional Director Scott Rommelt on his recent retirement, actually last Friday. And we're looking for a new regional director. That position is vacant, so Senator Drazkowski, I don't know if you'd be interested or not, but it might be something you'd be thinking about. We look to fill that position relatively soon. The DNR's footprint has 285 report-to-work sites statewide. And we employ approximately 3,350 employees, FTE configuratively, throughout the year. It equates to 3,150 full-time FTEs. And we have 290 owned or leased buildings. Now, these buildings, many of our shops, garages, hatcheries, co-managed locations, they range in size and function, all contributing to our DNR operations. Examples of buildings in our inventory are 954 shower toilet buildings, including vault toilets, 15 fish hatcheries, a tree nursery, 956 storage and maintenance buildings, from sheds over 120 square feet to pole barns, shops, and other facilities, and 196 offices. Some are report-to-work sites, and some people report to work perhaps in a fleet building or some other place throughout the state. So we are located throughout the entire state, and we have employees in, I would say, every Senate and House district in the state. A little bit about DNR by the numbers, and we can get into this in any way you want to slice it and dice it, but we do have a lot of assets throughout the state. 60 state forests, 170 scientific and natural areas, the list goes on and on. Our state parks, our aquatic management areas, over 22,000 miles of snowmobile trails, grant and aid trails, many of which go through private property with the permission of these landowners. 4,000 miles of biking, hiking, horse, and motorized trails within state lands, and over 1,700 public water access sites, almost 400 fishing piers. You can see some of the numbers. almost over a million angling licenses, 800,000 hunting and fishing licenses sold, 800,000 registered boats. We manage over 600 wild game species for the Minnesotans, and 240 million walleye fry, 1.8 million walleye fingerlings are stocked annually throughout the state. So rather than go through all this, if you have specific questions or are interested in some of these things, please let us know. But we do touch a lot of different areas throughout the state. As Mr. Mueller was referring to on the next slide here, our base budget, 24-25. Now this gets rather complicated. You can see on the bottom there, the natural resources funds. Those are all the dedicated accounts that people actually pay us to do what they want to do, right? Snowmobiling, ATVing, boating, camping, hunting, fishing, all of those things. Some of those funds go into the Game and Fish Fund. You can see the general fund there, non-rider, the general fund in the big blue. That has grown, as Mr. Mueller said, this past biennium. A large portion of that are pass-through dollars, the PILT payments, treaty payments. There was some increased tribal payments last biennium that were one-time. A large portion of that, probably 5%, was one-time funding that will not be in our budget this coming year, and this slide will look a little bit different when we get to that budget presentation. But you can also see our budget's roughly $2 billion spread across these 50 funds. Some people say it's one of the most complicated budgets within the government, the executive branch, and it's pretty complicated, I'll tell you that. They make up less than 1% of the general fund spending. We also have the Legacy Environmental Trust Fund and Outdoor Heritage Fund pass-throughs that go through us. And you can see, just a side note, 22% of our budget is passed through to non-state entities. Now I'm just going to go quickly through our divisions, one at a time. But just before I get that, I just want to say that the DNR is an equal opportunity employer committed to ensuring that no person will be discriminated against. And since 2013, the DNR is a beyond the yellow ribbon entity committed to supporting employees who are serving or have served in the military and their families. We have over 7 divisions through which we conduct our work. Each division has a unique work portfolio that helps the DNR achieve our mission and provide core services for users and to our outreach recreation and to reach out to our recreation system. Now I'm going to go through these 7 divisions, and you will learn more. Many of these division directors or deputies will be presenting issues as we move forward. I know, for example, we've been working very closely with Senator Hochschild in our Lands and Minerals Division on the Gas Technical Advisory Committee work that we were directed to do by the legislature, and we look forward to coming to this committee and discussing that in the near future. Lands and Minerals, as you can see, Joe Henderson is our division director. Mike Liljegren, Ted Anderson, and Cheryl Kelly Doby is our newest assistant director to the Lands and Minerals Division. Number of activities that we do: they manage real estate activities for 5.6 million acres, manage 12 million acres of state-owned mineral rights, and then mineral leases that we have, 270 active mineral leases, 158 of those are for non-ferrous minerals. They manage our real estate transactions and real estate portfolio, regulate and provide expertise on our mineral exploration, and then most recently, and one that we're very excited to be discussing with you, is this regulatory framework for gas and helium production. Next slide focuses on Ecological Water Resources Division. Katie Smith is our director there. Many of you have met her. Assistant directors Melissa Kuski, and most recently Jason Meckel has been one of our assistant directors in that division as well. They manage scientific and natural areas, prairie bank easements, aquatic invasive species work is housed in the EWR work. Water appropriation permits are housed in the Division of Ecological Water Resources, and that's where we have our groundwater observation well network that provides us the backbone and the data that we have there. The division ensures a long-term health of lands and waters that support and maintain our quality, biodiversity, and vital ecosystem services, and provides critical information and regulatory oversight to local governments, businesses, and landowners to foster natural resource stewardship. Next slide, please. Our Forestry Division Director, Patty Thielen, Deputy Director Andrew Ahrens. Really, forestry has a large footprint. They manage our 5 million acres of DNR administered land, which are all forest certified. We carry a dual certification from 2 entities, nationwide entities that overview our forest management activities on an annual basis and provide critiques, making sure we are doing it in a sustainable fashion, and we've been able to maintain that dual certification for many, many years. We provide about 1/3 of the fiber used by mills across the state. Our needs are to reforest 30,000 acres or more annually for reforestation after that final harvest has occurred. We also work with 70,000 acres of private lands, including forest management plans to help those get written. And we maintain a network of 2,400 miles of state forest roads throughout the state. Many of these roads provide the network we need to manage our forests, but also provide the backbone for outdoor recreation and tourism that's so critically important to northern Minnesota and throughout the state. Our Division of Parks and Trails Division Director Ann Pierce, Deputy Director Phil Leversedge. What's to say about the Division of Parks and Trails? It's pretty self-explanatory. 64 state parks, 9 state rec areas, and 9 wayside rests. 1.14 million overnight visitors in 2023, over 11 million daily visitors to our state park system in this past year. You can see they maintain our public water access sites, fishing piers, and water trails, and they deliver 8,600 outdoor education programs to 200,000 participants each year. The work that's done in our Parks and Trails Division through the Get Out More programs, for example, help provide increased outdoor opportunity to many, many thousands of children and families and to experience outdoors for the first time.
Assistant.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, what is your title now? Assistant Commissioner. Get Out, the whole thing, you just did that. We purposely has a legislature put money into making our trails more accessible, barrier-free, so that everybody has the ability, regardless. And it wasn't just about, am I compliant with Title II of the ADA, but the fact is you really robustly put some things in place in some of the vehicles that you had that people could use that had mobility limitations. You just highlighted that for a bit of a second. Can you kind of expand that, or do you have another slide you're going to show?
Mr. Chairman.
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Hoffman, I do not have another slide there. I thank you for correcting me. I meant to say our ICANN programs, Get Out that, but through the Get Out More appropriation that you're referring to, connecting people to the outdoors with disabilities was a huge part of that. Track chairs. We now have a fleet of track chairs throughout our state park system. We're working on getting more. Some of them are mobile that we can get around. We're just recently completing William O'Brien State Park. The lower campground will be 100% handicap accessible. The only park like that right now that we have, it's 100% accessible. Working with your folks and disabled partners programs that we have, we're expanding that. We have a network where we're building more disabled, handicap accessible hunting blinds, for example. We're also looking at the Keystone Woods acquisition that we recently acquired. How do we provide permanent accessibility for duck hunters, for example, on these grounds that they can drive to, that they can get to within 15 minutes of the state capitol here. So we'd love to talk more about that when we get to our budget conversations, and certainly Senator Hoffman with you and get your leadership again on some of those things.
So
thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Yeah, to hear about the accessibility and the barrier-free park system that you're saying, it was great. I wish I had money to give you, but if you look at the latest proposal, there's $1.5 billion that is being taken from Human Services to go in there. So maybe if you could help me identify where in the closet we could find some more cash, that would be great, because that is a very successful program that really opens up. All Minnesotans can have access to the parks, and thanks for highlighting that, Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Senator Hoffman, 2 things there. That highlights our mission, right? Working with all Minnesotans to make sure they can get outside. And we do have the funds available within our Get Out More work to get this work done and on the ground. We've been spending, we've just submitted a report to you all that you may be interested in hearing, but been spending the past year working with stakeholders, developing plans, making sure that these investments are being put where they need to be, putting fishing piers where there's fish, making shoreland fishing opportunities in places where people can go catch fish. and making opportunities for people to get into the park system where it makes sense. So it's a high priority for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman, for bringing that up.
Senator Hoffman already opened up the time for Q&A. I want to see if other members want to take this opportunity to ask Assistant Commissioner Bob Meyer question what he had presented so far. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for that overview. And how much does that job pay?
Well, I just have a couple more slides left.
You were going to offer me that job in Southeast. So, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Meyer, the 285 work sites, that just kind of prompted a question. What percentage of your agency actually goes to work and is not in the basement in their pajamas?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that information right at the tip of my fingers, but I can certainly share that with you. We have those numbers, and it's a fair amount. I mean, even through the pandemic, our folks work every day. We have foresters, we have enforcement agents, we have people in the parks and trails. Over 0.75% of our workforce come to work and are out in the field every day. So I will provide you a more detailed breakdown of that.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Weisenberg.
That'd be great, Mr.
All
Chair.
right. So, Assistant Commissioner, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We left off on the Division of Fish and Wildlife. Division Director Kelly Straka has been in that role for just about a year now. She will be working with us in the legislature this coming session. Deputy Director Pat Rivers, and just 1.1 million angling licenses sold. We have over 1,500 WMAs, which are the ground jewel of our state, giving opportunity for over 1.3 million acres of not only hunting and fishing, but also outdoor recreation, hiking, bird watching, and things like that. Managing fish and wildlife populations and providing outdoor recreational opportunities are the key focuses there. And also conserving and enhancing water and land habitats, regulating hunting, fishing, trapping, and outdoor, our three activities are outdoor opportunities. A lot of them lie within the Division of Fish and Wildlife. Our No Child Left Inside grant program, for example, is housed within that division. And getting children, youth outdoors is a huge priority for us, as I know it is for this committee as well. So we look forward to working with you on those issues. The next slide focuses on our Division of Enforcement, Colonel Rodman Smith, Deputy Director Lieutenant Robert Gorecki. We have 154 conservation officers in field stations. That number has been there for many, many decades. Our field stations haven't changed. Approximately 50 people throughout the state in other roles and responsibilities. 51,000 students certified annually in outdoor or motorized recreation safety. And we work with over 100 nonprofit groups to increase capacity for high school shooting sports and for other shooting sports through this committee's resources that they provided. And you can see we've had over 25,000 contacts with our stakeholders, with our customers throughout the year. That's not violations, that's talking with people, helping them out, many times saving people's lives. So we work very closely to protect Minnesotans as they're outdoor recreating. Mr. Chairman, lastly is our Division of Operations Services, chaired by Rena Solheid, and the Division Director is Rena Solheid, Deputy Director Judy Schmidt. We have over 2,900 buildings that they manage, as I spoke to, 5,000 pieces of mobile equipment, 3,200 land-operated items. You think of tractors, all those types of things we need to manage the land. And our website is managed by this division. We have over 64 million views in the past year. Providing administrative leadership and support to the department, supporting our staff through human resources, managing safety, emergency preparedness, and disaster response, and maintaining our fleet buildings and infrastructure. And managing that safety is just critical. And I think working with Senator Hochschild in some of the emergency management situations last year in the district, we worked very closely with our emergency preparation staff to ensure that counties, local units of government, and citizens had what they needed when they needed it, and they were safe when the floods and things like that occurred. So that's a big piece of that division as well. Mr. Chairman, that is a very high-level overview. As I stated, we would be more than happy and willing to meet with folks on any questions they have on this presentation or any other DNR-related questions, legislation, things like that. Please reach out to myself or John Waters, and we will work with you directly.
Okay. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Bob Meyer. Senator Weisenberg, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Assistant Commissioner. I guess well, we could be here for a year talking about the DNR, but I appreciate this, and hopefully we can work through this session and make some positive impacts on what's going on in the DNR. And I'm sure some people have heard me speak here before. You know, I have a degree in wildlife biology, and as a kid, my dream was to work for the DNR, and then when I started working for the DNR, it wasn't my dream anymore. We need to use science and not politics when making policy. And it's just, I was going to ask you what you do, but I understand it's politics and not science, so we can't be doing that. So when this is an agency that runs on biology, that's what we need to use when we're managing resources and not making up, you know, facts which are false. So hopefully we can do that, and we can use science when we're moving forward and not just false politics in the agency. And I know you did mention non-discriminatory policies. I've got friends that quit working for the DNR because that's not true either. You know, we need to hire the best person based on their knowledge that they have, not the color of their skin or their sex. And that's not just the DNR, that's all state agencies. So if we're not hiring the best people for the job, then we end up with inefficient government. So when someone gets points because they are, and you can say it's false, it's not. When someone gets points for, you know, being a white male, that's inappropriate. And I'm not speaking about myself. I'm speaking about people that have been in the DNR and who are managers, and they're forced to give preferential treatment to people of color or women. And I think people of color or women should get the job if they're the best person for the job. But these are real issues that we need to consider. And if we hire the best person for the job, we'll have better outcomes. So I could continue to talk about all kinds of things we need to do, but you know, I have frustrations within the agency not actually hearing that and sitting around the campfire and actually talking to people who know how the DNR works. It's a different story. So maybe we can make these changes and we can all work together, and I hope that's what we can do. But thank you very much, Commissioner and Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before going to Senator Green, I also want to interject what Senator Weisenberg just say. I appreciate his comments, but about hiring, and I know that we need to have people that are reflected of our demographic in our state, Minnesota, and sometimes we are very lacking behind of that. Qualification is important, but when you give people who don't necessarily are part of the mainstream outlook, you give them a chance they could produce better outcome. And I think I don't want to put myself in a spot, but in response to Senator Weisenberg, your point is well taken, but same thing like myself here, people question whether I could be a standing good senator, and I think I did well for the last 12 years, and also I think I did well as a chair. But when put myself competing with other mainstream members, sometimes, you know, folks that look like me or minority community or women are not considered and are put far behind in the considerations. But I hear you. Qualification should be considered, but also look at the demographic that our diversity is our strength, and it's important for our natural resource because we all use it. So thank you for that point. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll switch gears a little bit here. I got a ton of questions for you, Deputy Commissioner, and I know we'll be meeting, and so some of them I'll save for that, so we don't waste too much time here. But you've got, you know, we're looking at deficits coming in the future, and the governor's proposal seems to be cutting in areas that are going to be very, very painful to people in Minnesota. And I'd like to see more across the board responsibility in that. So just a couple questions. You got 2,900 buildings and you got 3,100 employees. You know, you're getting pretty close to one building per employee. So just kind of a breakdown of where a lot of these buildings are and what they're used for across the state. Do you have that?
Mr. Chairman,
Assistant
Senator Green,
Commissioner.
as I talked about, we have in this inventory, now we maintain that inventory to make sure that they're being cared for. We have an elaborate database. This is our asset preservation needs. There's 1,000 showers and toilets, okay? So we're down to 1,900. I have 196 actual offices, 389 or 956 storage and maintenance buildings. We have boats, ATVs, tractors. We have equipment we need to store. We have trucks we need to store, things like that. 15 fish hatcheries. I can provide you a detailed list. It's in our asset management report. I'll give you a copy of that. I can share that with the committee as well. That shows the condition of these facilities as well. There could be 150 in one park alone. I mean, when I say building, it's a structure that we need to maintain. Like I don't know how many buildings you would have on your property. I have a shed, I have a garage. I consider those buildings, right? So they aren't all office buildings, but I can provide you a detailed list of those structures. They're assets that the state owns and we need to maintain.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I understand that, I get that, but what I'm boiling down here, and I assume you're going to come to us with a budget proposal in the near future, and I'll be looking forward to that. What I'm getting at is there ways to combine some of these issues now? If they're toilets and in the recreation area, obviously you're not going to get rid of those, but they're not high maintenance for the most part. And one of the reasons I bring this up is if you look at what's going on in the state and what has been going on in the state since I got here, the decisions that are made that I would consider irresponsible, for instance, moving and putting $750 million into expanding the state office building when we got a Department of Transportation building that's sitting 80% empty. And so I'm just giving you an example. I know that's not to do with you, but my point is you got a lot of buildings there and you've got a lot of stuff that goes on that's repetitive, I believe, in nature. And so is there places, we're going to be looking at, is there places that all the agencies can cut? And so when I see that amount of buildings, it does, give me pause. Even the 900 and some offices you said, or 196 offices, and that I would assume, you've got 87 counties. Hopefully you're looking at offices in some of those counties and not majority down here. 3,100 employees, and in the past, I believe there was 900 and some of those were COs. Is that correct? Right in that area?
Mr. Chair.
Assistant Commissioner.
We have approximately 204 conservation officers.
Okay, then my numbers were off, but that excuse me, Mr. Chair, and that even makes it worse because you got 200 and some conservation officers and the rest are sitting in an office in St. Paul.
Assistant Commissioner.
Chair, and Senator Green, most of our staff work in the field daily. They're out in the field today in the cold weather. Our forestry staff's out cruising timber, out working with people. Our conservation officers are out on the lakes trying to save people, make sure they're safe. So to say that all of the DNR staff are sitting in offices is completely inaccurate. We can provide you a detailed breakout of where our staff are located. For your district, I can start there and show you how many people are actually in the office versus in the field and the buildings that you would like to close. So we can continue this conversation most definitely.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wasn't trying to make that assumption. I'm just saying I want to know. And if you can give me that, that's great. And so the other issue then too is I would like to know these field staff, exactly what are they doing and can it be combined? We're going to have to make some cuts. I mean, we've got huge deficit coming at us. And the money that was spent in the previous year, whether it was one-time spending or not, a lot of it, we don't even know where it went yet. And maybe it's not even spent yet. And so I'm not necessarily picking on you and the DNR, even though I like to do that, I'm saying that we're going to start looking across the board at places where we can hopefully cut down that deficit as it comes forward. So, but we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions to Assistant Commissioner on his presentation? Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, Assistant Commissioner, can you just give us an update on where things are at with the DNR and deer farmers? And I've been reading quite a bit of emails back and forth about second fencing being required, and just give us the lay of the land, where things are at, what are you requiring, and what's the lay of the land there for the deer farmers in Minnesota?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Westrom, yes, I'd love to. There was a state law that was enacted. It actually went into effect September 1st that is very ambiguous, and we're trying to actually enforce it. The state law says that farm survey are to be confined in a manner that prevents physical contact between farmed and wild cervidae. There was no other follow-up legislation. Maybe that would be something to put on your agenda to try to clarify what that physical contact piece is. To date, there's currently 79 deer farms in Minnesota. 19 deer farms closed during 2024, probably the small mom and pop operations. We've conducted inspections of 98 deer farms in 2024. We're working to bring into compliance 13 deer farms where inspections found failure to comply with the exclusionary fence rules designed to prevent contact between captive and wild deer. If a farmer has a plan, they say, I'm going to do this, I can't do it right now, the ground's too hard, we're working with them. If they say, I'm not going to do anything, then that puts them in a different category, right? So that's kind of where things are at. As far as deer farm litigation, the deer farmers did sue the DNR, the state, the district court, and they asked for some appeal. Actually, the state won in district court. It's been appealed to the 8th district. The court did not grant them a stay of the earlier decision that they were looking for. We're currently briefing the 8th district court on this appeal right now. And the district court did not stop us from enacting the fencing requirement as they asked. So we're working through the court system. The courts have been in our favor on these issues to date. And many deer farmers are frankly telling us they are not going to comply with the law. We cannot allow that. We have to enforce law unless, of course, the legislature is going to grant us some dispensation from that state law. So that's a short update on that. I know I'll be meeting with Senator Green on this with our enforcement staff soon. If you'd like to join that meeting, please feel free.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, specifically, what are they requiring for fencing then to meet what you're interpreting or viewing that law as physical contact? So you've got a 6 or 8 foot chain link fence. Does that restrict deer, or do you have to have 2 fences a foot apart?
Mr. Chairman.
What's kind of being enforced right now? Because it seems the intent of the law would be a fence would keep 2 deers from physically being able to interact.
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Westrom, we are looking at the vague law that was passed into law. And some of the options that we have, a doubled 96-inch high fence, which is probably very expensive, secondary mesh fence, solid material attachment, plywood, something like that, an electric fence, a string of an electric fence would do as well, and other options that farmers may have. Farmers are very ingenuitive, as we all know. And as long as they're working to meet that requirement, we are working with them. It's the ones that are telling us, no, we are not going to comply, that are blatantly violating the law, that are in a different category at this point in time.
So, Mr. Chair,
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Meyer, can you give me those numbers again? You said 98 farmers that you inspected in 2024, but we're down to 79 farmers. Is that all we have left in the state is 79 deer farmers? And did I hear that number right in 2024? Is that difference basically the ones that have closed this year?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Westrom, yes, there have been 19 deer farms that have closed during 2024. I don't know the number of animals, but many of these could have 3, 4, 5 deer. Most of those smaller deer operations, the hobbyists, I think, are getting out of the business. Currently, there are 79 deer farms in operation, And in 2024, we inspected 98 deer farms.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Meyer, that number was much higher just 3, 4, 5 years ago. What was kind of the peak, if you remember? I was thinking it was closer to 200. Is that 175, 200? Is that where we're down from?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have those numbers in front of me.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Meyer, when you say some aren't complying and some are, how do you try to mitigate that? And I guess at what point do you say, I mean, there's some that are arguing there's it's against the Constitution, so then the argument gets to be who's not complying? Is it the DNR that's not complying with the law, or is it the deer farmer? So how do you guys decide that you're the right one and you're not the wrong one?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Westrom, sounds like a conversation going around this building lately. We turn to the courts, and this is actively involved in the courts. So, and I will just say again, if a person blatantly tells us they are not going to comply with the law, that puts them in a different category.
Okay. Mr. Chair, my final point, but Mr. Meyer, you kind of made my point, but you're kind of coming across pretty strong that you guys are right and they're wrong. And if you're breaking the law, you're the one that you should be pointing the finger at, because if it's unconstitutional, you shouldn't be so confident that you're enforcing a law that shouldn't be enforced. And so I'd like to have a little better sense of not such a strong desire to just believe you're right, the DNR's right, because they're DNR, because they could be wrong. And so I don't hear that in your tone of voice, but that gives me concern.
Mr. Chairman.
Assistant Commissioner.
Senator Westrom, I apologize if that comes across in my tone. These issues of constitutionality, the deer farmers are litigating the DNR right now in the courts. I've tried to describe that to you. There are a lot of great deer farmers out there. We work hand in hand with these deer farmers. They're good conservationists. They're great customers. I could document the ones that say, hey, we're glad you're here. This has been a great conversation. Thanks for the input. Look forward to seeing you again next year. And then just like anything else, there are people who are not that way. And that's just the way our country is right now. And we're trying to work on these issues. We're trying to work with the deer farmers who want to work with us. And just like, you know, the Department of Agriculture working with the producer that's not in compliance or that's not abiding by standards, there are consequences. So what I'm trying to stress is the constitutional question is trying to be sorted out through the court system. It's been through district court. It's been appealed to the 8th District Court. They did not engage the stay that they were seeking. The courts allowed us to keep working on the fencing issue. And we need to proceed with motions of violations and cannot wait for the court decision. Unless the legislature is going to pass a law that says we don't have to. I mean, the DNR has to follow law. I have to follow law. Deer farmers need to follow the law as well. And we want to work with them to understand, come up with options. And I apologize if you feel I was coming across too harshly.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Westrom, and thank you, Assistant.
Mr. Chair,
Assistant
one more
Meyer.
question.
I wonder, we'd like to move along too. We had 2 other agencies that present, but.
One quick question, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So Mr. Meyer, do we anticipate the DNR coming with any proposal, maybe even through legacy or lottery funds, to maybe help with some of these costs if they're barriers for the farmers, but helpful for the environment? Just an idea, and maybe you don't know the answer to that, but might be an idea we should be talking about.
Assistant Commissioner. Sure. Senator Westrom, Wiesenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Assistant Commissioner Bob Meyer. So at 4:14 p.m. on January 21st, 2025, I heard you say that they're allowed to use a single-strand electric fence. Is that correct?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, that's one of the options our enforcement officers are talking with them about.
So, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Assistant Commissioner, if they were to do that, then you would approve that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to go on record on that statement.
You're not going to go on the record. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. We got to move along on this. Assistant Commissioner, okay, we're done, okay. Next, we'd like to invite Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Tom Johnson. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Just making sure, there we go, our presentation is going up. Pleased to see everyone again at the committee and see some new faces. We're looking forward to working with the committee this session, and pleased to be here today to give a brief overview of what we do at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And I'll try to zip through a little bit to give our some time for questions, which we're happy to discuss at committee here or offline, and also get to give some time to our sister agency, the Board of Water and Soil Resources as well. Some folks that you may see at the Capitol here from our leadership team, of course. We also have Deputy Commissioner Peter Tester. Of course, we also have Deputy Commissioner Peter Tester. Kirk Adelka is our Assistant Commissioner for Land and Strategic Initiatives. Dana Vanderbosch is our Assistant Commissioner for Water Policy and Agriculture. And Frank Kolash is the Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy. Other members of our leadership team that you'll see here at the Capitol include myself, of course, and then Rachel Gennady was recently added as our Chief of Staff, a new role really focused on issues that span across different divisions and media. So things like permitting reform and environmental justice and other wide-ranging topics that affect multiple divisions. Also, we'll just pick on our other members of our legislative team here. Maybe they can raise their hand for the committee. We have Alexis Donath, our legislative coordinator, as well as Adam Olson, who's our legislative assistant for this session. So you'll see all of us at the Capitol, and please feel free to reach out again to any one of us if you see us. Mr. Chair, this is supposed to have some text on it, but this is supposed to be our mission statement to protect and improve the environment and human health. And of course, we're very aware that this is a broad and wide-ranging mission. And so the next few slides here are really to do with just to give a flavor to the committee of the types of work that the agency does. There we go. Transitions are difficult. So protect and improve the environment and human health. This is our mission, and it takes a lot of different types of work to accomplish that mission. So what do we do? I think some of the committee members and members of the public will recognize some of the more traditional work that the agency does, like monitoring, analyzing the data that comes from that monitoring, and then developing standards that then support regulatory practices, permits, and different standards. Then we enforce the environmental laws that both the Minnesota legislature and Congress, have put forth to manage pollution. And of course, we're there responding to spills and environmental emergencies, and then cleaning up pollution from past activities. But we also do more of the strategy and planning work for environmental challenges, for complex environmental challenges that our state faces. So develop these strategies that reduce pollution over time. And that kind of planning, long-term planning, helps to build resilience to long-term impacts. We also address disproportionate impacts of pollution to at-risk communities. And we support businesses large and small in sustainability efforts as well as pollution prevention activities. So a small business loan program is very successful and popular program. We also have market development grants and for recycling businesses, many other sustainability initiatives that both increase jobs as well as positive environmental outcomes at the state. We do various studies. I'm sure the committee has seen the many reports that we create and provide for the entire state, and as well as environmental rules. We work with local partners, and including local governments, as well as NGOs and other entities, and of course our business community, to protect and restore watersheds. And then our recycling and management of organics and waste is a huge part of our programs as well. Generally, these fall into 4 different areas of responsibility, and that includes water, air, land, and climate. And as I'll talk about a little bit further down the line, this is organized a little bit due to how our federal delegations and state statute work. So water quality, of course, water is one of our most treasured resources in Minnesota, and the agency's water quality work is supported not only by our regulatory system, but also it starts really in the monitoring. So we have a robust monitoring system that is not only through funded by this committee, but also through the Clean Water Fund and Legacy amendment funds. That data turns into database standards for each water body, and then our regulatory systems are based on those standards and that data. Air quality, we operate a network of over 50 air monitors across the state that measure outdoor air quality. When there is air quality that is dangerous to human health, we do issue those air quality alerts that you see, unfortunately, more frequently than usual. We also, of course, have delegated act authorities in the state and our own state program as well. So there are air quality regulations, and those fall into then the permitting programs and client compliance and enforcement activities. What we call land is obviously distinct from other land work that is done at the county level or at the DNR or Bowser or other areas, but our land work is mostly surrounding solid waste and then cleanup of contaminated soils and other remediation activities, as well as general contamination and emerging contaminants issues that come up in product categories. Anything that ends up in our land, landfills, or ends up as a long-term legacy contamination from past activities. And then climate. Certainly, Minnesotans are experiencing more impacts of climate change. We saw a very extremely rainy spring this last year, and these types of trends are becoming more and more common. So the state has put forth a climate action framework. The legislature has aligned with some of those goals and codified them, and also tasked the agency with measuring alongside the Department of Commerce greenhouse gas emissions in the state and reporting those to the legislature and to the public. Of course, Mr. Stanley did an excellent job walking through our various statutory authorities, but here they are again for your reference. Apart from or besides the various statutes that are governed in this, by this committee, we also have, as I said, some authorities under 216 in the climate area for the greenhouse gas emissions work, and then also over in 325E and 325F, and those areas are sort of more commerce-related areas that we jointly work with Department of Commerce and other agencies in those areas of statute. As I referenced earlier, we do have 3 different programs that were federally delegated to implement in Minnesota, and that includes the Clean Air Act work, the Clean Water Act, and then the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA. So those three programs, we have agreements with the US EPA to implement those here in Minnesota. We really can't do this work without our partners. So it's certainly, first and foremost, that's the people of Minnesota, and in partnership with this committee and the other body, we have not only increased the amount of transparency and work we do writ large, but also created a dedicated community affairs team to really be closer to the communities that we work with. And so we have folks dedicated, one person dedicated to the metro area, folks dedicated to greater Minnesota in various capacities on the north and in the southern parts of the state, as well as western Minnesota. So, of course, we work with all levels of government. We have this delegated authority from US EPA, we're a state agency, and then we have this really direct connection to our local partners as well. We delegate certain activities, regulatory activities to the counties. We're very close partners with the counties on solid waste work, as well as the county feedlot officers in delegating that program. And then municipal city governments come to the agency and through the PFA for clean water funds, clean water state revolving funds to fund municipal wastewater treatment plants, and we have a permitting program under there as well. Of course, tribal nations, NGOs, and businesses large and small are also key partners for the agency, and want to particularly call out also our volunteer water monitor program, which has been just a really excellent and successful way to get folks outdoors and also participate in the work of the agency. The MPCA has 6 different regional offices, and so as you can see, St. Paul's our central office, but we have offices in Rochester, Mankato, Marshall, Brainerd, Detroit Lakes, and Duluth. The agency was established in 1967, which, as you may notice, is actually before the United States EPA was formed, and so just an example of kind of how Minnesota has always really valued our environment. And we have about 1,000, almost on the dot now, FTEs at the agency, which makes us a medium-sized agency in the scheme of things. Most of the agency's employees are scientists, so engineers, hydrologists, soil scientists, chemists, biologists, environmental specialists. A big portion of these folks do spend their time, at least part of their time, out in the field, monitoring and sampling. A high-level picture of our organizational structure, and then I'll walk through each of the divisions really briefly, but you can see under the Commissioner's Office is the Remediation Division, Watershed, Operations, Environmental Analysis and Outcomes, Resource Management and Assistance Division, Industrial, and Municipal. These are funded from a variety of different sources. As Mr. Mueller pointed out, the general fund is a pretty low portion in the base funding of the agency. We have received one-time appropriations that were sizable in the 24-25 biennium, but generally our base funding is only 18 million around in the general fund, and other sources really make up the bulk of our funding. In addition to this, we don't consider it base, as Mr. Mueller was mentioning, but the Clean Water Fund from the Legacy Amendment funds about $50 million per biennium of the agency's activities, mostly around water monitoring and related work. This is a picture, high-level picture, and you'll see it as we go along. We'll keep the pieces of these pies out for you to kind of see as we go through each division, but a high-level picture of kind of where we're spending the money at the agency. Note the remediation division, this $301 million, that does include the 3M settlement dollars. And so that is a little bit larger than what actually the remediation division has available to spend. So starting with remediation, $301 million with that 3M settlement in it. This work is not only to clean up contaminated properties, it also includes state and federal Superfund work, as well as we have a pretty unique system in Minnesota where we have agreed to take over closed landfills in perpetuity and manage those forevermore. So that is the Closed Landfill Investment Fund is meant, and to a lesser extent, the Metropolitan Landfill Contingency Action Trust are all there to manage landfills in perpetuity, which the state has agreed to do. The Resource Management and Assistant Division, there's a lot of work that goes through this division. It serves as a point place for a lot of our pollution prevention work, including work with small businesses that I mentioned earlier. There are sustainability loan programs and pollution prevention programs, but also rulemaking section is in the Resource Management and Assistant Division. There's hazardous waste, RCRA program, our federal program, as well as solid waste permitting that goes through this division. Watershed Division, again, a key source of the Watershed Division's funding comes from the Clean Water Fund. But this work is to really, a lot of these folks are out in the field investigating causes, sources, and potential solutions for water pollution problems. They do also house our feedlot program, our animal feedlot program, permitting program, and then manage several other grant programs that are passed through to local partners. Environmental Analysis and Outcomes, or EAO division, is where a lot of our scientists, although they're across the agency, there's a lot of data science and evaluation that happens in the EAO division. And this division is also responsible for developing environmental standards and making that data accessible to the public. Our industrial division, this is work that I think folks are quite familiar with. We work with large private industrial facilities on permitting, compliance, and enforcement. This work encompasses air quality, water quality, and then also specifically the industrial side of hazardous waste and underground storage tanks. The municipal division works specifically with cities and towns to ensure proper management of wastewater, stormwater, and septic systems. So this is our wastewater program for municipalities, but also things like stormwater management, as well as SSTS program, which is subsurface sewer treatment systems, or septic tanks. And finally, Operations Division. We centralize our operations in the agency, so all of our fiscal contracting, human resources, our legal department, communications, data management is all within the Operations Division. Moving to some of the federal funding and trying to move quickly here, one thing I just wanted to make sure I call out was the recent climate pollution reduction grants. This is through the Inflation Reduction Act. The state of Minnesota, partnering across agencies, secured a $200 million grant for the state of Minnesota, which is very exciting. This is going to be money certainly not just for the MPCA, our partners at DNR, Bowser, at Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health, all across state agencies are getting a lot of, across our food programs, I should say, are getting pieces of this $200 million. So it's really a transformational opportunity, and that can be anything from helping farmers to modernize their systems, to getting grants out to businesses to increase wasted food management. There's a lot of opportunity here. And then you can see some other of the federal grants that we've received. Another exciting opportunity, I think, has been the electric school bus program that we've been able to match some money from the state and with federal money to really make school districts across Minnesota eligible for these programs. At a high level, touching on the commissioner's priorities, PFAS continues to be a major complex and difficult to manage contaminant. We're ahead of a lot of states with the Minnesota's PFAS blueprint, a comprehensive plan for us to follow, a roadmap for the state. And the legislature has taken a lot of actions mentioned in the plan, including planning and design grants for municipalities who are going to be struggling meeting federal regulations on drinking water. Also, Amara's Law, the prohibitions, the long-term prohibitions on PFAS in products, that will drastically reduce the amount of PFAS entering our system. And then, of course, staffing for the agency to ensure PFAS becomes a key part of our programs and not an emerging contaminant, but now something that we have the staff to manage. So I want to thank the legislature for those key investments and policies. Mitigating the impacts of climate change. This is one of Commissioner Kessler's key priorities, as well as also the chair of the governor's climate subcabinet. We have the climate action framework. We're set for an update to come soon. Certainly that will be something we send to the committee. But also want to recognize the amazing investment of the legislature in climate resiliency grants, and that $100 million from 2023, almost all of that money, in fact, all of that money is either out the door or out for RFP right now. And so that's been really exciting. We've had the first initial rounds of planning grants were 75% in greater Minnesota. And now the big implementation rounds of funding for wastewater and stormwater projects, those are evenly split in the metro and in greater Minnesota. And so we've really made sure that we're getting this money out to all the communities that need it. And then finally, good governance and service to all Minnesotans. And this is something that we hope everybody can see themselves in on this committee and at the legislature. It's things not, like permitting reform, and as well as being more accountable and transparent to the public. So some exciting items to announce. We're hoping to have soon up a permit status dashboard, something that I know folks have been asking for many years. And then also want to recognize, of course, the foundational laws passed in 2023 related to cumulative impacts and environmental justice. So I'll leave you with one major success story that's wrapping up here after 100 years of environmental damage. The St. Louis River Area of Concern, 100 years of environmental contamination, and over a decade of dedicated work, not just with our state, but also with Wisconsin, tribal nations, the communities around the area of concern. It's been a really incredible collaborative effort. So I want to thank the legislature and this committee for investments over the years in that work, and pleased to announce that is on its way to being finalized. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Director Johnson. Any questions? Senator Kowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just an observation, Mr. Johnson. I really like the DNR's approach to presenting materials to us better. You kind of give us a glossy overview that's kind of filled with, puffy, glossy stuff that really doesn't communicate well to me. I think Commissioner Meyer had actually numbers in each of their areas. Can you get us at some point, can you get us numbers of employees in each of your divisions, total numbers of employees, maybe numbers of employees over a number of years, maybe over the last decade each year? Something like that would be helpful. It's too bad that the good governance and permit status dashboard was the last thing that was mentioned, but previous to that, we saw, you know, the electric school bus and mitigating climate change and PFAS contamination, a lot of other really ideologically driven stuff out of the last biennium. I'm hopeful that the agency will find its way towards a more common sense approach to not only what they do, but also communicating. And that would be starting with things like the permit status dashboard and actually serving the people of Minnesota rather than an ideology. Question for you, can you tell us, are you giving this same presentation to a committee in the House?
Director Johnson.
Mr. Chair, it's up to you whether you want to talk about the other body in this committee.
Well, I do, Mr. Chair.
Senator Jasinski, I think that's outside of jurisdiction, so.
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious about the agency's effort to communicate to the legislature. That's what I'm asking about. So I'm wondering if Mr. Johnson can tell us, is a similar presentation going on to the Environment Committee in the House?
Mr. Chair, we have not yet been requested to give an overview at the House Committee, the House Environment Committee, as of yet.
So I would wonder, Mr. Chair and Mr. Johnson, have you been directed to not participate with the House in this type of presentation?
Senator Jasinski, I don't want this to sound like a courtroom here. So if we can take those questions offline, I greatly appreciate, because we're gonna go, we do have Bowser next, and we're gonna run out of time unless our co-chair here agree that we will, if we go over time, Bowser will be included in our next agenda, maybe at the beginning of the next hearing.
I'm quite curious as well about Senator Drazkowski's question, so I don't mind hearing it. And as you and I already kind of spoke, if we got to add it to the back of the agenda on Thursday, that's certainly fine for Bowser to come back. Otherwise, I don't know if anybody has additional committees this evening, but I'm certainly willing to stay beyond 5 p.m.
Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just will note that if we decide in the Senate Environment Committee to have a debate about what is happening in the House and how our agencies are responding to that political maelstrom over there, then that's a lot. It's a lot. There'll be a lot to say. I think that this is not the appropriate venue for that. I mean, if we need to, I'll have the debate with you, I'll engage, I'll say what I think as well, so we can get it all on the record and air it all out for the people who are listening. But I think that actually hearing from our agencies and having the overview for our Senate here, this committee here, is what we're here to do today, and I would like to do that today.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Senator Drazkowski.
You know, while I appreciate that, Senator McEwen, one of our roles as a legislature that we don't do a very good job of is oversight. We get so caught up in our bills and doing our stuff. Our job is to understand what the agency is doing and to look at the executive branch and their operations. And that is the essence of my question here. I'm hoping that we have an agency that is willing to discuss and not get involved in political obstructionism, but actually willing to share what it is that they're doing with our House or with the other House. And so that's the essence of my question, Mr. Chair, and I'm hopeful that Mr. Johnson can answer it.
Senator Drazkowski, can you restate your question one more time so we are clear with your question? Yeah, go ahead. And I before you go forward, I do want to talk to my co-chair before we move. Go ahead. Ask your question. ask your question one more time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Johnson, have you been directed to not discuss your agency or give it a similar overview in the Minnesota House?
Okay, Senator, now I remember the questions, and I rather we not pursue that. I want to have, let me take a little short recess, having conversation with my co-chair before we open that to a larger debate, and we can certainly go all night if we want to go to that. I don't live very far from here.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Back from recess. Director Johnson, you may answer Senator Trzaskowski's question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I said, Mr. Chair, Senator Drazkowski, we have not yet been asked to present at the House. If and when that response comes in, we're happy to work with the committee leadership on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation today. I do actually have a question that goes to oversight of our agencies. So I would like to ask you a question about the area of concern that you talked about in St. Louis, in the St. Louis River waterway. And as you know, in the Duluth area, we've been working on that for a long time. There's been a lot of community resources put into restoring the St. Louis River to a place that people can fish, where they can swim, where they can actually enjoy the waterway. And I wonder, because sometimes when we talk about environmental issues that is phrased in this sort of passive way, we talk about the St. Louis River area of concern. For people who don't know why it became an area of concern, can you tell us a little bit about which corporate entities polluted those waterways for decades, causing the public to have to intervene and use the people's money to clean up a corporate mess? Thank you.
Director Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator McEwen. So I don't know all the entities. I'll say that this has gone back, as I said, about 100 years. And before there were a lot of our environmental regulations that we have in place. And so there were a lot of businesses and industrial facilities located right on the St. Louis River. That did include, to my knowledge, some taconite facilities and processing, but there are, to my knowledge, numerous facilities that were included in that, and again, prior to environmental regulations that we have these days. Even the Clean Water Act, when it was passed, the modern 1972 amendments, there was not a way to address that historical pollution within the Clean Water Act, and so the area of concerns work was established by EPA later, I believe in the 80s, to identify these areas that needed to be addressed more directly. So the Clean Water Act was set up to do this sort of ongoing, to address ongoing pollution, and the area of concern system was set up in order to address areas like this that just had a high concentration of polluting facilities.
Follow-up, Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. So can you explain, the area of concern encompasses Superfund sites, is that correct? Or a Superfund site, at least?
Director Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Superfund is a different part of law. I would have to check and see if that is also considered a Superfund site, but I believe they're separate types of work.
Senator McHugh.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I do, as I believe that the U.S. Steel Superfund site is part of the area concern, so I was just trying to understand, is it part of the area concern, or is it, how much of it does it encompass? So thank you for that. And I just wanted to convey to you that our community in Duluth is really excited about the work that has been done there, and appreciate all of the agency's work to get us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Johnson, you made the comment that one of your duties is to manage closed landfills. Can you give me kind of an overview, a high-level overview of what you do to manage these closed landfills? And I'll tell you why that I bring that up is because it's been brought to my attention anyway, that there's been landfills that have been closed and certified as closed and done. And then years later, the MPCA has come back and reopened the case, and then gone after the folks that had done everything to comply with the old law. And now, even though the MPCA has taken control of that, they still are trying to fine or fee people that have no longer anything to do with it. Can you fill me in on that?
Director Johnson.
Mr. Chair, this is actually an excellent distinction. Senator Green, we have both landfills that end up closing, and they are required to be managed by the entity that was operating the landfill for a period of at least 20 years, and then there's there are circumstances that might lead to additional years beyond that if there's still contamination issues. So that is landfills that are in the system that we're operating and then are closed and need to be managed. We had a number of landfills in, I will forget the year of the law, but I believe it was the early 2000s. But I'll have to get back to the committee on that. Or work with Mr. Stanley, but the state decided, I think it was, again, I'm trying to remember the numbers off the top of my head, but over 100 closed landfills that were brought into the state's management because they all were, it was unclear how they would be able to be managed otherwise. So the closed landfill program is specifically for those landfills that were operating at the time and were closing at the time of that law and program that was established. Other landfills that are closing these days have to follow the rules in Minnesota rules that lay out the processes for monitoring and other capping of landfills, et cetera, management activities that are at least 20 years and then evaluated beyond that for what contamination issues persist after those 20 years.
Mr. Chair, and I've got a lot of other questions on that, but I would like it, if you have time, to set up a meeting, because I'd like to talk to you in person, because we could go on all night with some of the questions that I have, and I know that
Absolutely.
nobody here wants to do that. But just to give you a heads up on that, if you could, before we meet, come up with some numbers as to what the changes have been that the MPCA has made, whether by rule or statute, and that has affected our counties, for instance, that are now in dire straits when it comes to landfills because of the regulations that have changed. And so I'd like some numbers on that, because we're going to have to come to some kind of conclusion on that, because otherwise what's going to happen is, in my area especially, we're going to have a mess if you close these landfills, because this stuff's going to once again be dumped back on the roads where it was before we started this process. So if you could do that. And I guess I'll end that, except for that I will bring up to you another thing that we'll be talking about is the land and the property that the state owns, the state-owned property that is not in compliance with some of the standards that the state has put on private businesses. What is the MPCA doing to clean up some of those properties? And we can discuss some specifics on that, if you could bring that information too when we do meet. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Green, for the request. I don't think that there's a question there.
Just happy to meet, Senator, and I'll follow up with you and your assistant to find a time and to get some details on the property you're mentioning. I'm happy to provide that information.
All right, well, thank you, Director Johnson.
I just got one quick thing,
okay.
Mr. Chair. Will we have Commissioner Kessler in front of us at some point? I do have some questions, but they might be more appropriate for her. So, and I can hold those till later if we're going to have her in front of this committee at some point.
At some point, and you and I will talk about that.
Perfect. Yeah. I'll save them then.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you, Director Johnson. Now I'm going to call the Minnesota Board of Soil and Water Resource, Mr. John Jeske. Welcome. And also Andrea Fish, but both of you, also before the Duluth High School's leaving, I just want to acknowledge them. They'll stay here throughout. I want to ask our members to stay on for 30 more minutes for this presentation. It may not take that long, but it could. So welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, as well, for inviting us in this afternoon. John Jeske, Executive Director of the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, and with me I'll have Andrea introduce herself.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Andrea Fish, Assistant Director at the Board of Water and Soil Resources.
Okay, and we will begin, and over the summer I also grew some tomatoes and planted some trees too, so we've got a farm in Senator Wiesenberg's district between Randall and Flensburg where we plant the trees, and I grow the tomatoes in my backyard in St. Paul. So I won't go through a lot of detail, but we have much more we can offer if you're interested in that, and you can do that either again in a committee situation or come visit with each of you or any one of you on a one-on-one basis as well. Our agency's mission is focused on looking at all of Minnesota and working with partners and doing conservation primarily on private lands. And that's the way our agency is structured. You can see in the next slide. I'm going to hit the arrow button. There it is. Okay. We have a board that is appointed by the governor. It also includes county commissioners, soil and water conservation district supervisors, watershed district managers, city elected officials, townships as well. So it's a very diverse enterprise, and that board provides the general direction and approval for many of our programs and most of our appropriations. Next item. Here are there's a short list of the partners that we work with at the local level. Our work, because it is on private land, it's really, really important that we have someone local that can be trusted and communicated with on all kinds of different things, whether it's plans or projects or practices. It's really critical that those organizations have people who can do that work from a technical level, for biology or engineering, whatever it takes to do the work. Is also important that they are doing the work to assure the fiscal integrity of the state funding that goes down those pathways. This is the only slide that I've got that shows, kind of the agency's budget. We will obviously be able to give you more of that in detail if you're interested in that. This shows the places that the money goes. And it comes, from the general fund is a really important part of our budget. We don't have the ability to generate, fees and other things that are dedicated to our work, so the general fund provides most of it. This shows that the funding is largely driven by funding going out our door to the local governments, into those partners' hands, and they work with those landowners to do these voluntary conservation projects. The next slide again shows what I mentioned earlier, that we do most of our work on private lands, and you can see this map here shows the highlighted areas are the private lands of Minnesota. Obviously, you heard from DNR, and they're responsible for most of the state's public lands, which happen to be more so in northern and northeastern Minnesota, of course. There's also a big chunk of federal land in that area as well. But our landscape that we're working with is with these private landowners. You can see there that shows some of the waters and some of the impaired waters that the MPCA staff are highlighting in the work that they do to identify those. This is the list of our statutory authorities. They're all a little bit different, of course, and unique. And we can talk more about how each of those work, but they establish both the authorities that we have to establish those local special units of government, the watershed districts and stormwater conservation districts. It also indicates how we do the water management, more so now than ever on a watershed basis, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. And there's also a couple of programs that are deal with land use controls, again, through local governments, the buffer protection and the Wetland Conservation Act protections. I mentioned the wetland protections, and one of the other things that we do as part of that regulatory effort is a service to county and township and city road authorities to mitigate their wetland impacts that they have to have when they widen and improve a road. There's both state and federal permitting that goes with that, as you know. We have a partnership with MnDOT so that we also fold in the state projects as well, and we have a mandate in statute to do this wetland mitigation on behalf of those local authorities, and we also, of course, need funding for that, and historically that has come from a capital investment source, but we've had a difficult time in the last few years getting a predictable and reliable source of that funding, and so we're kind of on the edge of a situation where we may need to adjust the policy to do something different than we had if we can't count on those state funds being available. So we'll come back to that either in this committee or perhaps in another committee as well, but this is an important issue that's facing us right now, and also all of those local governments all around the state. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to take on a few more of these pieces, and I'll come back at the end.
Okay, go ahead. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Jaski and I wanted to touch on a few of the programs that had a lot of enthusiasm behind them the last couple years. So members of the committee who were here during the last legislative session will remember these, and those who are new to the committee may have even heard them in various local news articles. The first one we wanted to talk about was the Soil Health Practices Program. This initiative works with private landowners through our local partners on these voluntary soil health programs that, in short, are intended to keep the soil and its nutrients on the land. This also does help control the flow of water in cases where there are heavy rainfall events. It can provide resiliency to those events in a changing climate. It can provide for keeping nutrients in place in the ground, including possibly carbon sequestration. Some examples of those practices that you might see on the ground in your local communities include continuous living cover crop on the land, no-till or strip-till practices, providing for grazing on working lands, and other practices that maybe have cumulative event opportunities and outcomes. Our soil health is funded in a number of ways and has a number of components to it. We have the State General Fund and the Clean Water Fund as investments in soil health practices in Minnesota, and we were recently awarded a $25 million federal grant to address soil health needs in the state. On the ground, this looks like supplemental staffing at the local level to increase capacity to help farmers and landowners with their soil health projects, as well as overall delivery assistance, providing education and outreach, or incentive payments to farmers to help them either pay for changing their practices or investing other ways in their property to address soil health needs. We also have a water quality and storage program that received a lot of interest the last biennium. The goals of that program are to increase water storage capacity and control water rates, again, in times of perhaps high water flow or high rain events, and to protect the infrastructure that Minnesota has already invested in. This too received federal funding, a $25 million federal fund awarded in October of 2024. And so far, since this was funded within Minnesota, we gave out 16 grants last year for $5.5 million, and we continue our work on that program. The accelerated water storage program in particular is one thing that's necessary to adapt to the changing climate. This allows us to acquire, design, and construct projects that control that water volume and rate. These, again, are all voluntary and locally led, and as you can see from the pictures, sometimes these look like more mechanical infrastructure, and sometimes it's as simple as making sure that a wetland is placed somewhere near a major source of water to slow the rate that that water flows into a river or stream or other local waterway. Another program that I think has really benefited Minnesotans of all types. Historically, we've worked with large landowners, but our Living Landscapes initiatives are finding new partners within Minnesota and building relationships with new Minnesotans. We have a few different types of these programs. The one that's perhaps the most popular is our Lawns to Legumes program, our Habitat Friendly Utilities program, and our Habitat Enhancement Landscape program. The Habitat Enhancement Landscape Program is intended to address larger pieces of land to establish and enhance habitat. Sometimes these are done on our existing easements. So far, we have awarded 12 organizations $3.4 million for these initiatives last year. And then Habitat Friendly Utility provides funding and technical assistance to put pollinator habitat on large energy corridors. This could be solar farms as well as electric transmission corridors and other utility corridors, making use of that space, providing dual benefit. And then, of course, Lawns to Legumes. This is a program that directly connects with individuals, whether it's businesses, people who are leasing apartments, landowners, homeowners, providing $400 to create pollinator habitat in their yards. We've had more than 5,000 projects installed since 2019 in all 87 Minnesota counties. Beyond just the individual gardens and plots that have been put into place, this program has trained up 270 volunteer coaches to help participants in the program. We've supported more than 80 local businesses, and we've created more than 14 million square feet of pollinator habitat across the state. 13,000 trees and shrubs have been planted through this program. And we are just starting our Pollinator Pathways grants. These are grants for soil and water conservation districts, NGOs, tribes, and schools to create pollinator habitat programs for individual neighborhoods and communities. Since 2019, we've awarded 42 grants under that program.
And Mr. Chairman, one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning was that, I didn't put up a slide on this, but we have about 150 staff. Most of the work is done by the local governments who have, the people who are in those local offices in every county and corner of our state. We have 8 regional offices across the state where our staff are housed from, and then, of course, we have a lot of them are out and about doing various things, including, engineering crews and things like that are in the field quite a bit. So if you have any more questions about that, you can certainly let me know, and I'll make sure we get you more details if you're interested. I'm going to continue with our presentation, though, to go on to to go up a level from our backyard type programs to the landscape ones. This opportunity that's with us right now is this Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which is a program that we just got renewed with a USDA agreement, and the governor signed it. So this allows us to do more of this wetland restoration and grassland restoration work. Again, we're doing this in full cooperation with landowners, and again, using those local government offices, and then they, of course, hire contractors and others to do the work and provide the seed and so forth. So that's an opportunity that will bring money to Minnesota if we can find our own companion to that. This next slide shows the landscape that has been now broadened to include more areas in northwestern Minnesota and include all the counties that have more than 30% agriculture. We were able to raise the cap, and we also were able to add a practice that will allow us to aim some of these projects and practices at areas where we have private well water quality issues. And the last point here is that ratio, the federal to state funding opportunity is quite enticing, right? If we have $3, we can bring in $7 of federal funding under their Federal Conservation Reserve Program, which is part of the federal farm bill. I mentioned the watershed approach, which we are now almost 10 years into, and the statute that was passed that time ago now indicated that the agency was to move towards a 10-year period where we transition from the geopolitical boundaries for water management to a watershed approach. And this is really important because the information, the science that we have and the analysis behind that, Mr. Johnson talked about some of that from the MPCA perspective, and we use the information that's collected by the MPCA, by the DNR, by the Department of Agriculture, by the Department of Health to pull that information into a plan of action, which is what these watershed plans are about. They work in the following way. They work through that geography of a watershed, but they include the existing local authorities that are part of that landscape, right? So we have counties, soil and water conservation districts, watershed districts, cities all pulling together to build those plans and implement those plans with state funding and other resources. You can see here, just so you know, that there's kind of two aspects of this. There's the metropolitan 7-county watershed approach, which has been in place since the early 1980s, and then, of course, the part that covers the entire state, which is, again, voluntary and encompasses all of Minnesota. And as of the next 2 years, we will expect to see all of the state now with a state-approved and locally adopted watershed management plan. And, Mr. Chair, members, we can show you many more of these examples. You know, the work that all the science tells us that the targeting could lead to projects and practices on the ground. And this is just showing how we go about using that information to develop plans and practices that will improve the water. And here's one example from a metropolitan area. You can see a project that would reduce the phosphorus for that lake, and this McCarran's Lake, by 39%. That's not giving you science, that's giving you statistics, but the science would be behind all of this. And then the next one I'll mention is just up in northwestern Minnesota. This is a Grand Marais Creek stream restoration project, and these are really useful in terms of both providing water quality, they provide dynamic water storage, they provide habitat both in the channel that's restored as well as, you know, in the surrounding area around it. And allows that farmland adjacent to them. They often put these little small setback levees in place to help protect the farmland at the same time. So multiple benefits in one place. And Mr. Chair, members, that's our presentation. Thank you for the time, and we'll take any questions now or later.
Members, any questions to Director Jeske? Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a couple questions, and maybe I was working on other stuff here at the same time. How many employees does Bowser have now?
Mr. Chair and Senator Green, we have about 150 in 8 offices in Greater Minnesota and 1 office in St. Paul.
Okay. Follow up, Senator Green.
Okay, and then thank you for that. And then also, like the report from MPCA, you don't have any numbers in here. and I want a couple of different numbers from you if I could. One is, well, for instance, do you know how much you spend on the lawns and legumes?
Mr. Chairman.
Director.
It's almost in my head, but not quite. We didn't have all of the budget details in the presentation, obviously, but we'd be happy to share those with you or come back and share any of them with the committee.
Senator.
And I would assume you're going to be coming back for your budget requests? Or you're not going to do that? You don't want?
Mr. Chair and Senator Green,
Director.
we'll be happy to come back if invited.
Okay. Just one more thing then. I would like a list of projects that you've done that have been completed. And the reason I ask is I go through a lot of reports. In fact, I'm going through some right now. And very few of them ever have a completion. It's always phase 16. And so you're working on a lot of stuff out there, and I'd like to know what's been completed and what you're working on specifically. So if I could get that, that'd be great.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Senator, we'll be happy to do that. We might come visit with you to make sure we're getting you the information in a way that fits your description of it, because when you use the word project, there's many of those things. I want to make sure I'm using your definition to try and come up with that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Eichhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel that Senator Drazkowski's question earlier was relevant enough where I think you guys should answer it as well. I'd just be curious. I think as we have oversight out of you guys, it's important to us how you interact with other legislators, with communities, with just people in general. If invited, will you guys show up?
Director.
Mr. Chair, yeah, we had a conversation this morning in person with Representative Heisman, so when we'll work that out with them for sure, and we talked about that very thing with them. So that's the plan, is to, a little bit day by day, but when they ask, we'll be ready.
Thank you. Senator McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And similarly, just because this does seem to be a question that keeps coming up, and in my mind, it is a very political question rather than an oversight question, but I assume also that any members of the DFL caucus in the House, if they requested a meeting, that you would also be happy to meet with them and go over any of the work that you do. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair and Representative, our Senator, yes, we would be happy to do that, and we have a meeting scheduled with Representative Fisher in that case in the House, and we'll be doing that with many members for any reason.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for a very engaging information hearing, from members. The next committee, which will be Thursday, I'll pass the gavel to co-chairs, Senator Eichhorn. And so, Senator Eichhorn, maybe you can give us a little overview, a little summary, what might be on the agenda, what will be on the agenda.
Well, we won't have to have Bowser anymore because we went through it. That was good. We will have a couple bills up. We've got a couple Drazkowski bills. We've got a Hoffman bill. We've got a Hochschild bill, and then we'll have a report we're going to be hearing. So.
Okay, well, thank you, all members. And in addition to one thing that we forgot to note, Senator McCune probably noted earlier, in addition to co-chair, Senator Eichhorn and I, we have two vice chairs, vice chairs, co-vice chair Senator McCune and co-vice chair Senator Wiesenberg. So I just add on that in case he didn't. Both of them didn't mention that when they were introducing themselves. But thank you all, and thank you for staying a little over time, but appreciate your cordialness. And I know it will be exchange hand, but we'll continue to maintain our Senate decorum or Senate conduct. So thank you very much, and the meeting is adjourned.